Shot the yellow.
Entrepreneurship, it's our game. The Big Potato Podcast is yours to claim. From startups to scaling up, we cover it all, so don't mess up.
And welcome back to the Big Potato Podcast. Yeah, that's right, you guys. That's right. Season 2, episode number 6. Yeah, we are rolling in the month of October now. Imagine that. Felt like 2024 just begun. And we kicked off the Big Potato Podcast. And imagine we already in season 2, episode 6 in the month of October. And we continuing to focus on entrepreneurship and business development, really bringing the insights to you guys. Happy to be here once again, yours truly Kendell, and my co-host Stuart, Mr. Fortuné. Stuarty, what's going on, buddy?
Good night, Kendall. Good night, everyone. Boy, this weekend I went on a little hike.
The great outdoors.
The great outdoors. I went and hike with Rocking Fishing Boys.
Ah, boy.
Yeah, 2 boys in St. Mary's College. Young, Form 1, Form 2.
Okay.
They're doing that outdoors thing. So, hike for about half hour to the jungle.
Ah, boy.
Grappled on a cliff. Onto a rock. Fishing. Catch a fish.
What?
Yeah, catch
Bare
a
hands?
fish. Nah, no, throwing the line. I came back. So, I don't have to say I'm tired, but I'm still revitalized because, I mean, you know, take a physical exertion, your thighs, you're climbing up, you're climbing down. But I'm still revitalized, you know, I refreshed. Sat down on the rock, was able to watch the ocean for hours while I'm fishing. So, yeah, good times. It was a good time out there with those guys.
Beauty of nature.
Yes.
So refreshing.
Very.
So refreshing. Something we spoke about on this podcast as well last season. I'm telling you guys, thank you so much for always following, all our subscribers, and everyone as well sends us emails and great feedback. Remember, subscribe to the Big Potato Podcast and follow us on all social media platforms. Get in touch with us at the Big Potato Podcast at gmail.com. All right. So tonight, without further ado, as Stuart said to me before we set up this episode, let's do another special edition. And this time, let's focus on graphic arts, visual arts. Something that is so instrumental, so key to driving business in this era. I'm telling you guys, it was always important to know, Stuart, but especially right now.
Well, that is the thing, because as I said, right now, the way people communicate is not the same way as they used to communicate long ago. So the way the tools, you know, the medium you're using for that communication has changed. So now it's all about visual.
That's right.
The TikTok, the social media, the telling your story, the communication via design. That's what it's all about.
That is absolutely correct.
So, as I said, for the modern times, I thought it was very important for us to have a conversation where we could discuss, give tips, you know, bring on someone, I should say, who could give the tips to the audience in terms of how to properly communicate your message using design.
And I'm telling you, Stuart is a great designer. Our guest tonight is an expert designer. I don't have a design bone in my body. I'm telling you all. I could tell you all what I want to see. I could explain it to these guys, and they are so creative that they bring it to life. He's actually the creative director for the Ogaro Group, a dynamic digital marketing agency. Background in languages, business, and art. Passionate about helping brands tell their story and connect with their audiences in meaningful ways. He has over 20 years experience in sales and marketing, So it's not just design. He understands how to infuse the design in order to be successful in the sales and marketing arena. He's bilingual, as I said. He has achieved combined experience and expertise in graphic design, motion design, and social media strategy. I'm telling you, he's doing it all as a digital designer. His portfolio includes collaborations with Silhouette's Lounge. We know it. NSEC, Trotty Trot Rum Punch, BBL Studio TT, Mitsuda Limited, Country Style Plantain Chips. So many products, so many brands, and so many more to come. It's my pleasure to welcome Mr. J. Ogaro to the Big Potato Podcast. Welcome, Jay.
Good night, everyone. Once more, thank you guys for having me. I really do appreciate this, and I'm really happy to be in a place where we can have these conversations where the only outcome of this is that everybody wins. So again, I'm glad to be here.
But that is it. I like how you said it, everyone wins. But I met at the ATM the other day and we started to talk about design and the industry and all of these things, and the conversation was going so good that he even mentioned, you should probably come out to the Big Potato Podcast and discuss it. And here we are tonight.
Here we are.
Yeah, here we are.
Speak it, man.
We can be responsive. We always interested in more and more people to discuss things with. It's another industry we haven't discussed as yet. So, everything, the energy is always combined. Just randomly, just met Jay. I knew him from before, but, met him after years of not seeing him. And here we are.
Well, for beginners, I love potatoes. I love podcasts. And this just seemed like a really good fit.
Yeah.
And yes, it was really a pleasure seeing you after all this time, because we met nearly a decade ago through music, and now it's good to see that we are all taking these directions where we are now influencing, impacting, and helping other people through, that talent that we were born with. And we just found a way to repurpose and direct that in a positive direction. So, again, I'm here. And I'm just ready to get cracking.
Nice. And we're glad to have you. Thanks for being here once again. So let's jump inside our first segment. It's called What Caught Our Eye? You know it already. Yep, you know it already. Quick insights for entrepreneurs based on stories and articles that we saw recently. Stuart, what caught your eye this week?
Well, what caught my eye was an article called What's Next for Graphic Designers, according to Industry Insiders. It was an article on Creative Broom by, hear the guy's name. You always know a pen name. Tom May, right? Tommy, right? I'm not saying it's not his real name, right? But just very suspect.
It is.
From May 2024. Now, what caught my eye? I mean, the article generally, as the title says, is, what they expect the future of the industry to be for graphic designers. But what caught my eye in the article really are a few takeaways. One, we talk about this almost every episode, the impact of AI. It's like the elephant in the room. So what they were saying is that AI cannot be ignored. So for instance, Simon Case, the founding partner of Chromatic Brands, said, using an example of ad resizing, he said before, when they had to do ads for different formats, different sizes for their clients, that's weeks of work with numerous persons involved, time, resources being wasted to get this done. He said now he uses a platform, he just indicates all the information up front, what sizes he wants, what the uses will be. He'll go make a cup of tea. By the time he's back, everything is done. It's done, right? So also with visualizations, they do a lot of expos. So instead of doing 3D rendering and photoshopping of how they want to visualize their booth and their space within the expo, now he said that's like a half a day of work as opposed to weeks and weeks of work. So AI definitely cannot be ignored. How you use it, if you let it overpower your creative space, is a different thing, but it cannot be ignored. And then also, a powerful thing in the article was the need to be different. Here it is, Kendall. There's a quote. We live in an age of convergence. Designing for algorithms, not people. That's what people do it now. Graphic designing for algorithms, not the people. And what they say is that forcing everything into this group where you have to fit in, and it's just basically pushing this mediocrity.
Yep.
You have to fit into this format. So even if it is for our podcast, we could do our research to see what similar podcasts, what they're looking like, what sort of thumbnails they use, and what they suggest we do. And it's just basically to look like everybody else.
Yeah.
So you're really designing for the algorithm. And I thought that was very, very important. People understand, what people are really designing for right now. But at the end, they say that the future is still bright for the graphic designer. Just because AI and these mammoth technologies are coming and influencing the industry, there's still a lot of space because the most successful designers, they will now become multidisciplinary creative strategists who are fluent in branding, positioning, and strategy as visual design, not just the visual design. They will leverage the AI and global freelancer networks to amplify their capabilities. And just like Mr. Ogaro, have single person agencies or a few people in the agency, not large agencies anymore. So they will still have space for them. They'll be instrumental in helping brands create distinctive, emotional, resonant experiences across multiple digital platforms and channels. Those graphic designers who could still cultivate agility, strategic rigor, diverse perspectives, and I guess an understanding of new technologies. Those designers will be the ones to lead the way. So any thoughts on that?
Yes, actually, what I'd like to share with you is an analogy. You see, when the first motor vehicle was created, many people doubted that now at the onset of the motor vehicle, carriage drivers would now be out of a job because now no one would want to drive carriages. So horse and carriage is now out of the way. But the human spirit persists. And now we have taxi drivers. And I'm saying that to say this, that the onset of AI is something that didn't happen yesterday. It started in the 1940s to the 1950s. That's when AI was first utilized. That created a checkers game where that checkers game was taking note of your moves and then adapting to play against that style that you use while playing checkers. And this was in 1945. So even AI as a trend, and I wouldn't define it much as a trend, but the trend is really and truly how AI is heavily utilized now and the availability of AI to who you would call, your John Doe, the guy on the street. Because now even your clients have access to AI. Some even have greater access to AI than you do. And as designers, we are actually not very concerned about AI because, there's a certain degree of creativity that each person possesses. And that creativity as a designer, it's your style. There are so many designers out here today, and if you know who the designer are from a distance, you can see their style of design and say, hey, Ogaro did that, or hey, Narayan did that, or whatever the case might be. So in 2024, the way that AI has become a part of everyday life, especially having a stronghold in your marketing industry, we as designers harness AI to streamline our work and make things a lot easier for us. For example, we may have a client that may want to have an image depicted, and it's not an image that you can Google. They do not have any idea of the image or any record of the image. They might have an establishment where it is definitely something where you cannot take images or videos. You can't use it there. And now you need to generate this. And this is where that AI would now help us to streamline our work, because in a couple of seconds, we can now generate that image, depending on how efficient that AI is. Because even though AI is here, and AI does have a stronghold, it's not quite there yet. So in essence, I would not, as a designer, be very concerned about the future of my profession due to the onset of AI. I'm actually looking for more ways than I've already found, where AI can now become a part of my streamlining process, which then it reduces the time it takes for me to create quality content or to do anything else marketing-wise. And anyone in this profession, we already know that the more tasks you can get completed in a short amount of time, it means that your revenue, your take home goes up, because the main capital of a designer, besides his creativity and experience, is time.
Correct. I mean, Stuart, that's a great point that Jay raised. Something that we always talk about as well, utilizing the AI as a tool to really assist you.
That is it. You see, when you, as you said, a client might come with an idea, they can't describe it, but at least you could generate something and you could say, well, yeah, just like that. But here, change this, change that. And no, at least you have the ball rolling, as opposed to them coming with nothing. As you said, you can't get a reference image from Google. They've never seen it registered anywhere. You're really trying to take their words and trying to, bring that to life. It just makes the process easier and quicker, as you said.
And takes up some of the auxiliary tasks, sending emails, scheduling stuff, and doing some of the marketing tasks that he said as well. And we're going to get into the AI conversation regarding design a lot more later on with Jay, because we have a lot to talk about that. Before I go to what caught my eye.
Yeah, what was your thoughts?
What was my thought on what caught your eye was really about the smaller teams and organizations where, I mean, we all knew, well, if we are of a certain age, these agencies really having a lot of people, a lot of different people with different skill sets and that sort of thing, and as you said, it will take a lot more time sometimes to process and to get the work done. But now you find that people are leaving agencies, going out on their own. Some people not even entering agencies, they're just starting their own, because there's a rise in the skill level, the expertise, I guess the tools, as we just spoke about as well. And creators now and designers are finding themselves participating a lot more, I think, than before in entrepreneurship. And that segues perfectly into what caught my eye.
Well, let me just say something in relation to what you mentioned in terms of the increase in the skills of the workers. Some of the senior, more seasoned executives in the industry, they look at some of the younger persons and they say, but this person, more skilled than I am, based on the training and so that they had, they coming into the industry with. So that is what, as you said, also will allow for the more people to have the smaller individual advertising agencies of their own, because you have this level of skill that even surpass some of your bosses. So that natural journey of saying, well, let me start my own thing. I'm just as good as them. I could compete with them. So yeah, just wanted to touch on that point there quickly.
Yeah, and definitely we're going to get Jay's perspective on that shortly. But what caught my eye this week, the silent communicator, the importance of graphic design. This actually was on Forbes Communications Council in July. Now, let me tell you something very quickly in this article. They spoke about graphic design as a visual problem solver, basically simplifying complex ideas into visually appealing narratives that are easy to grasp. Example, a well-designed logo, like Apple's. It encapsulates the brand's identity, and it gives the brand an identity that anytime you see it, it almost signifies something in your mind about that product. Of course, they talk about tools like infographics, which have become hugely popular to break down complex information. And of course, once you have your design elements, your brand kit, your color, your typography, shapes, all these different things, they help to evoke emotion. They help brands to establish a deeper connection with their audiences. And when this happens, it helps to drive traffic, generate leads, and of course to increase your brand visibility for awareness. right? So when you think about strong brands out there and you think about their design, why do we like them? Things like Nike, things like Coca-Cola. I remember when, and the article speaks about it too, Coca-Cola had their campaign, which was very successful, with the Share a Coke campaign, where you could actually get your name on the can. I mean, when we look at some of these campaigns, we sometimes forget that there's a graphic designer behind there doing a lot of the work and a lot of the creativity. So out of this, Jay, we realize that graphic design should be integrated into every communication strategy to stand out in a crowded market. What sort of insights you have on that?
The aspect of branding is way more important than a lot of the general public in Trinidad and Tobago acknowledges. Because we have a visual representation of a graphic designer in our minds that is pretty far from the point. People see graphic designers as someone who sits behind a computer, music playing, a cup of tea, having fun, and then they charge an exorbitant price. But as you mentioned, with the brand assets and elements, what goes into that takes a lot of thought. It takes a process. It takes a creative process, but it also takes a very clinical approach to how your brand is perceived in the eyes of the public, which directly is going to impact how they receive you and the connection they have with you. And based on that connection they have with you, that's how money is going to go back and forth. It is very, very important. And just as it was in the Forbes article, they could not have said it better. Because the job of a graphic designer is indeed to take that which is in the mind of the client and then translate it into a visual message that catches the eye of their buyer persona and delivers a message that culminates in a call to action on behalf of your clients. And that in itself makes you an intermediary. It makes you a translator. It makes you an interpreter between the brand and their objective.
Fantastic. Stuart?
Well, what stuck out to me there was an old example our marketing lecturer used to use back in Lockjack, when he mentioned just now about how the logo could evoke emotions and lead to perceptions and all of these things. And the example he used was Jordans.
Yes.
Normal Jordan sneakers. When you see that Jordan logo, you know, all right, that's a Jordans. That man in the game. But people protective of the brand. So when they see one, that imitation, it's like, no, that's not real Jordans, man. That's not real Jordans.
Like the brand is yours.
Like the brand is yours, you're very protective. Where that man get that? Where that man, he get that on a car in Key Report.
Brand connection. People have developed a strong, unexplainable, and almost automatic allegiance to the brand.
Yes, that connection to the brand, that you defend it.
To the point where so many other basketballers and basketball brands have come forth with their own brand of apparel, and it has all followed the dynamic of the Jordan logo. The silhouette of the basketballer in a particular position that could be perceived as their signature move. Nothing is new under the sun.
Yes.
But it has all came from that point, and that Jordan logo is the grandfather for 90% of basketball apparel logos that you see today.
But that's why we have it here, brother, to break these things down for us.
For sure. And I mean, the brand connection, folks, we couldn't have summed up this segment even better. That is what the importance of great communication through graphic design essentially is. We get deeper into it.
You could also break that down into two very important words: brand memory. And that is what you want to burn into the minds of your buyer persona, your target demographic.
Yeah, we get deeper into it in the following segment. But this segment is over. What caught our eye? Brought to you by IBOMAQ. Stand by. Whether you're seeking guidance or solutions for your business, we're here to help. Contact us via IBOMAQ868@gmail.com. That's IBOMAQ 868@gmail.com and let's discuss how we can collaborate for your success. And we're back. A fantastic, terrific conversation with Jay Ogaro, creative director of the Ogaro Group. Now, let me tell you guys, it's all about graphic design tonight. And it sounds so simple, huh? As Jay said in the last segment, Stuart, it's graphic design. You just behind a computer, playing around with colors, and then charge you a big invoice. I love it. It's not as easy as that. Neither is the output of very successful graphic design and communicating your brand story. And that's what we want to get into now, Jay. Just briefly, your story. As an entrepreneur, I noticed that you got started during COVID with your own company, but obviously you have loads of experience from before. So what would have driven your entrepreneurial journey?
Well, to understand what drove my entrepreneurial journey would first begin with understanding what made me fall in love with design. And I think art is something that was a part of me since I was a child, like 3-4 years old. And my love for arts, visual arts, came from my dad, because I could remember there was a time where I was writing on the wall. And, you know, mothers being mothers, her first instinct was to want to put me through the wall. And my dad approached that differently. He bought me a sketch pad and a pencil, and he said, anytime you felt like drawing on the wall, draw on this, and when I come up from work, show me what you did. And not knowing that he was an excellent visual artist himself until I was actually in Fatima College, and he saw me doing my SBA, and he was like, let me show you something. And he took down this old dusty sketch pad. And my dad was an amazing artist. After CXC, I wanted to do this as a living, create art and get paid for it. And, you know, I was always, downtrodden by people. Oh, God, you can't make money doing that. Ting. What you going to do? Make painting that will sell, whatever the case is. And my art teacher was like, you can be a graphic designer. And I was like, what's a graphic designer? I did not even know what a graphic designer was back in those days. And when I found out, I was like, that's what I wanted to be. And that was 2002. And that did not happen for me till, let's say, 2008, 2009. But from 2002, I did a lot of work within the sales, customer service representative / marketing positions. And that's why I started to learn about businesses. But between 2008 and 2014, I got into music, which was a great avenue for me to express everything that I couldn't just express like that. And I needed to have design for my artwork. And as we all know, graphic designers aren't exactly, where you'd go to for a small price point. So I actually got, my hands on the software, and I started fiddling with it and fiddling. And between then and there, I started to understand just a couple of things, just off the bat, understanding a couple of things, yet not understanding the important things. That seriousness came into play during COVID. And that's because in 2017, I was injured. I was unable to work, and my first business went under because of that. And I started off 2020 working as a laborer. I was doing construction. And then COVID happened, and there's no construction. And when you have no money coming in, and you have a girlfriend who loves to eat, you also know a problem. And I just decided to combine everything that I was really good at and find a way to monetize it. And the monetizing actually came as an influence from this Chinese business mogul known as Dan Lok. And he has always been talking about a high income skill. You need to have a high income skill, a skill that per task you can make a livable amount of money. That is not by the hour, but by task. And it needs to be something that is highly valued. And one of the things he mentioned was copywriting, but then he mentioned graphic design, and he started mentioning how you can go about doing that. And that stuck in the back of my mind. And during the second lockdown in 2021, I simply did a course in graphic design. And I did a course in social media management. And I started taking any client that I could have taken.
Mm-hmm.
And my first client was actually the Trinidad African Drum Group, the Drum Association of Trinidad and Tobago. That's Egbe Omo Oniesheshe. And that gave me a lot of experience. And then from there, I had, one or two clients coming in. The money was still not enough to actually create a living, mind you, but it did put food on the table.
Right.
And from there, I started to grow. And with advice and consort from one of my alumni, a guy named Brendan Leong, excellent guy. He lives in Paris now. And he was like, bro, you need to get a proper laptop. I was like, I didn't have one. And this guy sent me a proper laptop. And I just took off from there. And when I started the design, there were things that still wasn't coming together. But as I continued, I began to improve. I began to become more aware of the principles of graphic design that is necessary and what you need to do to create emotion, one, and two, how to guide the eyes of your viewer from that point where they are aware that there's a flyer here and guide them through the process of that flyer from the beginning to what the deal or the bargain is and to the call of action, because it's a thread that they follow.
Excellent, excellent. Well, you said so many things there, but let me start from the beginning. Could you just, I guess, for the audience, explain what's the difference between a graphic artist and a graphic designer?
Oh, well, first and foremost, there are so many similarities. The outstanding similarity is that the graphic designer and the graphic artist, they both appeal to the emotion of the viewer. However, a graphic artist does work more on the trajectory of perception, enjoyment, if you may more say that. However, graphic designers' purpose is to translate and send a message. So you would find graphic artists do more of like photo retouches, photo edits, creating actual art that you would display somewhere or you can see and enjoy or you can speculate on. However, a graphic designer is the guy that you go to and say, hey, I need a flyer. Hey, I need a billboard. Hey, I need this done. I need that done. Once it's advertising and sending a message, that's where a graphic designer gets involved.
How do you use that design to generate emotion?
We use that design and how we use the design to send that message. Again, it is through principles of graphic design. Some outstanding principles of graphic design that cannot be ignored and must be implemented in order to come together to send that message would be 1, color psychology, 2, hierarchy, 3, repetition. There are many others, but these 3, they stand out the most to me. And that's because color theory, based on the type of colors that you use, you tell people and you announce what this is about before time. For example, black is elegance, it's mystery, but it's also more or less a color of aristocracy. If you want your brand to look, let's say, for example, you want your brand to look premium, you're going to use colors like black or purple that donates royalty. If you're dealing with food, you're going to use colors like red and, more food colors and that sort of thing based on the type of food that you're appealing to. And then you'd use colors like, for example, certain shades of blue for the health sector. And then you're going to look at repetition. You would repeat certain types of typeface that you would utilize, and you would see it's something that a lot of new graphic designers, they commit the offense either knowingly or unknowingly, but they use 9 to 10 different typefaces in creating a message. And the message almost seems like it's separated different messages, when in actuality, you should use no more than 3 different typefaces for what you're doing. And the typeface that you choose, whether it is serif, whether it's sans serif, based on the type and the family of the typeface that you're using, also comes together to express the message in the brand image of who the client is. And then we have hierarchy, the way that you place things, to balance the way that you place things, the size that you place things that gives your design a clean, fresh look. It is not too choked up. You use negative space that makes stuff more readable. I'm pretty certain that you have seen ads from premium companies, and it's simply white.
Mm-hmm.
And in the middle, 3 words, just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And we already know who it is. And you know what? We are going to do it. Whatever it is, we are going to do it. So these principles of design is one of the most fundamental things that a graphic designer needs to know, understand, and practice. And it is what separates the sheep from the goat. Now, when I've now started doing design, there are so many times where my designs have been rejected because these principles of design were not utilized, and they were rejected by people who does not know about principle of design, but they just knew that this did not look right. So even people who don't know principles of design knows when it is absent from design.
No, I'm happy that you mentioned that because, as I said earlier, I am not a designer, but I could tell you when something stands out more to me than something else. So it's in line with what you just said, that it definitely does communicate through even very simplistic ways. And is it simplicity is sophistication, Stuart?
Simplicity is sophistication. That is the statement right there.
Mm-hmm. And that's it. And I mean, I'm glad that you brought that to the fore. But before we get to that step, Jay, in terms of creating something, is there a process that the designer would go through with the client to get an understanding of exactly what sort of emotion they want to evoke, what type of voice, what type of identity their brand needs?
Yes. And the question we would first ask is, who are you?
Mm-hmm.
Who exactly are you? And a lot of people, when you ask them, hey, who are you? They would say, hey, I'm Kendell, and, I'm 30 years old, and I like spaghetti. But it goes deeper than that. You see, just as with you on an existential level, you need to know more about yourself before you can communicate with others.
Mm-hmm.
You need to know that, hey, I'm Jay, and I am not neurotypical, I am neurodivergent. And this could prove to be a problem in many instances. And therefore, I need to know how to deal with that so that when I communicate with people, the communication is not misconstrued. Just like your brand, people need to know who you are.
Right.
Because if I create content for you, the first thing people are going to ask is, who is this? You get a text message from a phone number that is not saved on your phone. You ask, who is this?
Mm-hmm.
You don't study the message as much as you start studying who is the messenger. Can I even trust the message if I do not know who this person is?
True. And I mean, in terms of creating that sort of identity, you go through that discovery process.
Uh-huh.
You come up exactly or as close as possible, I'm thinking, at that stage with what this client wants to evoke, what their brand represents. And then you go into creating some brand assets. So before we take the break, I want to talk a little bit about some of those brand assets and what we may refer to as a brand kit.
Right.
How important is that for brands, and what exactly does it comprise of?
Well, for starters, if you are a company who is about to embark on a social media campaign, for example, and your social media platforms is going to represent your storefront on social media, and you have no branding, then you have no storefront, because your brand kit is your brand identity.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to build this brand identity to the back of the minds of your target audience. You need to build brand memory to the back of their minds. And you cannot do that without a brand identity. Just like our banks tell you, no shades, no hat, no nothing, we can't make it out.
Yes.
People on social media can't make it out. And during the discovery call, when a client asks for something in particular that requires a brand kit, I simply ask them, do you have your brand kit?
Mm-hmm.
And if they say no, then I take them down this rabbit hole, which means you need to build your house from the foundation, because I'm here to make your life simpler. Now, your brand kit or your brand identity as it comes together is the elements that come together that announces you before you enter the room.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing you need to know before you begin starting your brand kit, who are you as a brand? What are you providing, be it a product or a service? And how does that product and service solve a problem for your target demographic? Because you could sell anything you want. If it is not solving a problem and creating value for that person, they are not going to buy it. We can use food as an example. You could sell food. Everybody buys food because everybody has to eat. But the difference between buying food from you and from the person next to you is that they are getting value for their money and the food tastes good, right? Fab, features, advantages, benefits. So you need to know who you are as a brand, what you're providing, who you are providing it for. And from there, you can then start creating your brand identity, because who you are providing it for means that you're creating a brand identity to appeal to that person. What does this person spend normally like? How do they spend their time on social media? How do they spend their time off social media? What are this person's concerns? What are the obstacles that they want to overcome or need to overcome that your product and service can now cause that for them while they pay you?
Right.
Knowing what that person thinks, feels, how they act, what they like, you can now create a brand identity that appeals to them. And long story short, branding is what is said about you when you're not in the room. So we start with, after determining your brand name, we start with the logo, which people would say is the most important part of the brand kit. Actually, a lot of people are of the misunderstanding that all you need is a logo, which is not true, but a logo is one of the defining parts of your brand kit. That's the steering wheel in your vehicle. And your logo comes together to show a visual representation of what your company is about and what they provide, or something that represents them, represents an ideal that they go by. And that logo, again, people are pretty misconstrued about logos, because there's another thing that new graphic designers do a whole lot, and they make logos and they use it as an opportunity to demonstrate all the tricks that they've learned along the way. But that is highly unnecessary, because if you do all of that and then the logo isn't even vectorized, we now have a new problem. I would recommend that your logo, you limit the colors in your logo, and the colors in your logo is what you want to use from your brand palette. A series of colors that is going to represent what your brand stands for by colors. And this is where the color psychology begins. So you have your brand logo, and then you have your brand palette. And you're going to start with these two things, and you're going to build from here. You're going to build now to typography, the type of font that you're going to use for the name of your company, the type of font that you would use for headers, subheaders, detailed information. And this is the typefaces that you are going to use across the board, so that when it comes together and people see a particular lettering in a particular color with a particular slogan, you don't even have to ask who it is. You know who it is. Because if you're in Port of Spain and see somebody with a box of red and white eating chicken in it, you're not going to say, hey, that's that Jimmy's chicken. You're going to say that's KFC.
Correct.
All you need to do is put red and white on a box anywhere in the world, and you would immediately assume it's KFC. And that's because they have burnt brand memory to the back of the minds of everyone on this planet for the past how many decades.
Yeah.
And that is the power of branding. So we're going to use, as I said, the logo, typeface, brand palette. There are also different types of logos. There are brand marks. There's a typographical logo. And the reason why you would have different variations of this brand mark is because there are different places you may need it to fit. Landscape sign, billboard, square sign, probably to fit in a small corner somewhere, for branding on merchandise, for branding on, paraphernalia, for whatever the case is. You would have your logo, your brand mark that falls into that. And you can then utilize them to fit a particular space.
Yes.
So you need to have that. then you'd want to design shapes and patterns that goes in line with your branding. I normally do shapes, patterns, and a background using the color palettes, and that can be used across social media.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing you're going to use would be mock-ups, and people love to show you non-functional mock-ups. They will show you mock-ups. So, okay, this is how it will look on the billboard, or this is how it look on this, or it look on that. I would literally make your call card artwork a mock-up, and from your brand kit, you just send that to print. So I like to create functional mock-ups as part of my client's brand board. Yes, other designers would say, hey, you're throwing away money. People are going to expect that we do that and whatever the case is. And it's not really that. It's just that my demographic comprises of a lot of businesses trying to get up off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can help cut a corner here for them, cut a corner there for them, I will.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the biggest way I can cut a corner for them. Because in your brand kit that you get from me, you get free artwork that you can use.
Fantastic.
You know, and I would finish off that with your Instagram highlight buttons. I would create those for you as well. Your social media icons, customize WhatsApp icons, so that way your brand looks like your brand across the board. You won't get this big old-time funny-looking Instagram logo from 2010, you know, showing up on your artwork and just throwing your colors and throwing your scheme up and that sort of thing, you know. If it is looking elegant, everything is going to look elegant down the road.
Mm-hmm.
If it is energetic, it has to look energetic down the road. Whatever emotion that you're invoking or whatever message you're sending, every aspect of your content is going to embody that from there on out. So now having, you know, most of the elements of your brand kit together in such a way that now the client can now take that and utilize that. And if they go to anyone to print, your colors are always on point. Your elements are always on point, and they do not look like a different person every time they create content to advertise. Because a lot of new businesses do that. And, you know, they do it to cut costs, but they still pay the biggest price. And the biggest price is that your brand is forgotten. People see the content, but they don't identify it with the brand. And then we have brand image.
Mm-hmm.
What do people think about you? What are your core values? What do you hold on to? What about the person behind this business? Who is this person? What does he stand for?
So you said all of those things captured in a simple logo?
Well, not so much the brand image as I would talk about it, but the brand identity, yes. Some people have logos that, you know, the logo is an animal, and the animal probably has nothing to do with the product or service that they provide. But the type of animal tells you a bit about what the company stands for.
Mm-hmm.
You might see a wolf, and if you go to some churches, they'll say, yeah, they see wolves, but no, if you actually have this thing called internet or watch documentaries, you realize that the wolf would represent family. It would represent vigilance. It would represent upbringing. It would represent strong bonds through family. It would represent defense, wisdom. Because lions and tigers are king of the jungle and this and that, but you never saw a wolf perform in the circus.
Mm-hmm.
True.
Preach.
You know, so people can use logos and elements of logos to represent something. Not just the product or service, but to represent something. And then the typography at the bottom of the logo would tell you, this is what we do.
And that's a fantastic description, and I would say summary of a brand kit and brand elements. Almost a masterclass in a nutshell, you know. I'm telling you guys, this is what the experts do. So when you hear your graphic designer asking you particular questions, probing about what your brand represents and what story you really want to create, because it's one thing to create your brand kit, but we'll talk more later about how you use that kit. Stuart?
Yeah. But before we go on to the next segment, I wanted to just mention that this is a kit that should be revised, reviewed, periodically. Something that stood out to me when I was doing some research for this episode was that the US government, they changed their official default font from the traditional Times New Roman to the Calibri.
Mm.
So a simple thing like that, because when they initially started off with the first font was way back in the day when everything was pretty same way we started the podcast. Right now is a different medium being used for communication. So they switched over to the Calibri to be able to help with the communication of the message, both locally and when they're dealing with foreign embassies and different formats. And so it's something that you might want to, yes, you started up in 1843, but in 2024, you may need to make some little tweaks.
That's a fantastic point, Stuart. And thanks for bringing that to the fore.
I would agree with it because times change, things evolve. Let's look at Scotiabank's logo today. It is a bit different from the Scotiabank logo we grew up with. Look at the First Citizens logo today.
True.
It's a bit different from the logo we grew up with, and it's a couple of years apart. Every couple of years, companies revise their branding, or if they decide they're going in a different direction, they would gradually rebrand, and before you blink, you realize that the brand is a bit different, but you didn't notice when that change was happening because it happened gradually. It is good to revise because, again, technology is ever changing, it is upgrading. When logos were being designed, logos were crests back in the 16th century drawn by hand, and then, going down the road with the computers, logos were JPEG images, which it was top-notch technology back in those times. And then logos became PNG images. And that was top-notch back in the time until you had to blow it up on, let's say, a billboard or a street sign. And then it becomes pixelated. And then, we started using vectors for logos because vectors have the ability to just expand into infinity and you don't get any pixelation on the outlines. Everything stays intact, colors stay rich. We do logos for printing CMYK profiles so that the colors that you see when you create it are the colors that come out on the print. And we have been making strides as far as technology is concerned, and the way that we can now expedite keeping the quality of the logo preserved how it was in the mind first. And there is definitely no doubt about it that things are going to improve over time. And everyone is going to have to rebrand at some point in time. I rebranded once since I started my business. And my rebranding worked for the better. My rebranding actually changed the entire demographic that I started working with, And it's helped me because now I could bring more value and I could also receive more value because of that.
Excellent stuff. I really enjoyed the conversation, Kendell.
I mean, it's flowing as you said, just like water. The elements of your brand kit, my people, it's not just their logo. As you heard Jay say expertly, he went through a list, even reaching to Instagram highlights, the thumbnails for those. And it's all because it must represent a continuous story. And we're going to talk more about storytelling inside the next segment. Stick around.
From Ibadan to Helyard, from slavery to independence, learn how Helyard, the Trinidad All-Stars, created the Trini identity and how that was leveraged for our independence. Get your copy on Amazon now.
Yep, we're talking graphic design, guys. Welcome back with Jay Ogaro of the Ogaro Group. I mean, so many gems, so many bombshells already tonight. Whether you're on the side of being an entrepreneur, a business owner, a brand owner, or perhaps you are in the design field or thinking about getting to the design field and participating in that industry. So many bombshells, so many gems tonight. Stuart, I'm telling you, it's flowing right now.
Right now, we're just skimming through so many things, just like the psychology of colors. Spend a minute on that.
Mm-hmm.
We could spend a whole episode on that.
Trust me.
Symbols, shapes, all these things represent something.
All of these
so
things.
It's very important.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we had more time, but again, we're doing as Maya Angelou said, you do the best you could. until you know better. And when you know better, you do better. Right? So as of now, we're doing the best we could, and Jay helping us do better.
Fantastic. Now, Jay, you mentioned in your earlier life that you started off with art. You did a lot of drawing and so on. And I mean, we don't reveal age on this podcast. But of course, I'm thinking that this may have been some years before a lot of the digital tools that we have available today. So in terms of that process of actually drawing, and I remember back in the days, you go to a graphic artist or a graphic designer, and they would literally manually draw things and, create the elements for you. Is that something that you still inculcate into your design process in this day and age? And what other tools have advanced that sort of, I don't know if to call it analog design or legacy design? You would let me know.
Well, for starters, I would call it design.
Right.
I would call it design. And I literally start with drawing.
Mm-hmm.
I have started drawing pencil on paper, pen on paper, and my then girlfriend saw that, and she was like, "This is really how you start stuff?" I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "How would that be better?" I was like, "A digital tablet that I can draw on directly." And she was like, "Oh, okay." And then she got me that for Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
God bless her heart. But I start with drawing, especially when it comes to branding, because someone has an idea for a logo, and they would send the idea for the logo. It might be a drawing, and I would scan that drawing onto my laptop, and then I take the pen and I start drawing and fixing edges and looking at things. And then the consultation starts. Hey, these are the shapes that I'm going to use. These are the curves I'm using. This is why I'm using these shapes and curves, because these shapes and curves here, it embodies what your business is about. Give me your thoughts. Because as a designer, you have rounds of consultations and adjustments that need to be made. One thing that I would like to dispel, one myth I would like to dispel is that you tell a graphic designer what you want. He says, "Okay, no problem." And he puts it in the microwave, and exactly what you told him, it comes out like that. No. Good design comes with a series of revisions and, communication between the agent and the client. So we start with that drawing process, the ideation process. Be it a logo, be it your branding kit, be it a flyer, there's an ideation process involved. How am I going to tell this story? What elements am I going to use to tell this story? And how is the story going to culminate? And that's not just for graphic design. That's also for video editing, because I do mobile videography. I use, my mobile device, and I use stabilizers. I use, I'm a DJI guy, so I use a DJI gimbal.
Mm-hmm.
And I just straight to give you an example of how a story is told. Today someone was selling folding chairs. How am I going to sell a folding chair? I literally had someone throw a folding chair over my head and let that person catch the folding chair. And while they did that, the background music was a snippet from WWE where they're talking about, "Oh my God, the folding chair," that kind of thing.
It's the chair.
And he caught it, and he was like, "No, it's not that kind of zest." And then he pulled the chair and sit down and started telling about the chair.
Fantastic. I love it.
So you aligned it with something that, with a culture that people very well are aware of, but when they see it, it brings a shock. So they're like, "Oh, they really do that?" And then they start listening, and then they hear the price of the chair and how much you can get for the case. And, that was that. The story was literally told in about under 20 seconds. But it took the ideation process, and that happens in graphic design. We find a way to tell the story. And a very good example of that, I would like to quote and also salute Lonsdale and Saatchi, one of the biggest design companies on this island, one of the biggest marketing companies on this island. They had a application. They were advertising that they needed a graphic designer. And what they had at the bottom was AI isn't there yet. And they had one of those AI generated pictures that when AI now started generating pictures, things used to go a little awry, things were off. And this lady that was generated by AI had 3 legs. I saw it and I said, yes, Lonsdale, you did it again.
15 fingers and these kind of things.
Yes. And there are so many ways to tell a story that the biggest amounts of time you take in the design process is the ideation and the creation and acquisition of the assets that you need to do that. Now, this creation and acquisition of assets take a lot longer when your client doesn't have what? A brand kit. Because now you're fighting while you're running hot. You're going commando.
In the jungle.
Because now in the process of what you're doing could become elements of a brand kit for them. Or it may not.
Totally understood.
So what is their next design going to look like? So that is what takes up the chunk of time, the ideation and the acquisition or creation of the assets necessary to create the artwork. Putting together the artwork is more or less a smooth process and have a little back and forth going on, 1 or 2 rounds of revisions, X, Y, Z. But, that is what we do. And a part of that process is also pulling inspiration from other graphic designers that has done that. For example, if you are a person accustomed doing, product advertising, and now your new client is, let's say, a clinic, what I would recommend you do is look up a couple of clinic flyers and see how it is put together. See the color coordination used, the color psychology, see the typefaces that are used, and see how they tell their story to bring you from point A to point B. Because if you've never done it before, you need to have an idea of what has been done before. And I can tell you off the bat that this is one of the few times where you cannot count on AI to give you exactly what you're looking for. I literally dropped content on TikTok where I asked AI to generate a flyer to prove that point. So you need to see what other graphic designers are doing, how they have done it, what was trending at that point in time, does it apply now, X, Y, Z, and then from there you would now have a bit of a roadmap of how you're going about creating this particular piece of artwork.
Brilliant. Well, let me ask you something. We're discussing, again, communication through design. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of communication between yourself and your client to understand what they're trying to represent. That communication initially could come across through the form of a creative brief.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if you want to tell us what you look for in a great creative brief, which will prevent you from having to do as many retouches, You read this creative brief and you know exactly what the person looking for. What would a creative brief like that look like to you?
Well, to tell the honest truth, I have come across a very small handful, a very small percentage of clients that actually have the information necessary to produce a functional creative brief. Because you see, a lot of clients know what they would like to see in their minds, but to make the connection between the mind and the mouth, there is something that is not going on. And I'm not saying that they are not intelligent. I'm saying that expression from mind to mouth is something that we as a people struggle with, even though we don't admit it. So that's why you get a bit of back and forth going on. People who have been in the industry for years and they have established businesses and they have dealt with designers before, they cannot produce a functional brief because they have worked with designers before. But if you come across a client who have not worked with a designer before, most likely you are the person who's going to be creating the brief by asking probing questions. So you basically ask what that person is looking for. You're going to ask that person what they would like to use, what's the message you would like to send. You would probably send them different types of designs and ask them what fits your style. Then you can understand if they're looking for grunge, if they're looking for premium, if they're looking for minimalist. And then you can now create that design to the aesthetic that they want.
Brilliant.
And I mean, having done work with a number of graphic designers and agencies, it almost is second nature to some of us, the creative brief process coming out of our internal ideation for our brands and so on. But as Jay said, sometimes it's not as easy to create this document or even to express what you're looking for. And that's okay. Once you could go through the process with the designer, they would lead, they would guide, and they would bring it to a place of comfort that you think that your brand is represented properly in the general space. Now, we have a lot of, this podcast is aimed at Gen Zs, millennials who are getting into entrepreneurship and business and so on. But for someone who wants to get specifically into graphic design, obviously educating yourself, as you said earlier, you did courses, you always try to improve your skills. You're definitely, obviously, on top of trends and understand what's going on in the industry. How important for upcoming graphic designers is your personal brand and your portfolio?
Well, before you start branding others, you need to brand yourself. You see, if you are into sales and marketing, the first product you're ever going to sell is yourself. And we have been selling ourselves our entire lives, our entire adult lives, we've been selling ourselves. When you go to an interview, you sell yourself as a brand. You dress a particular way for the interview, and you bring documented proof that you are of the understanding of what is going on in the business and that you have the skills required as well as the personal attributes required to function in this environment.
Mm-hmm.
And you would like them to pay you. You basically are selling yourself as a brand every time you go to an interview. The first time you meet a woman that you're interested in, the first thing you're going to sell is yourself,
Mm-hmm.
from the way that you dress, the way that you carry yourself. In my case, talk a pack of nonsense because I know that if I could make you laugh, I could get through. And you sell yourself as a brand. So you brand yourself first, right? And branding yourself first begins with you understanding who you are as a person and how you want to carry yourself. From there, you can then brand yourself visually. I am my agency.
Mm-hmm.
I am my agency. No matter where I work, I dress for business. I dress down on a Friday. I would not come into an establishment in a 3/4 and a slippers just like that. Unless it's a day where I'm really not working and they're just like, hey, we'll meet you somewhere, we want to collect a check. Yeah, well, if it's the sun making real hot, I will wear, shorts and slippers. But again, I would present myself in such a way that says, hey, he is casual today, but it is casual business.
Mm-hmm.
The way I speak and carry about myself, I actually had accent reduction training in 2005. I have done these things and, work ethic. But the most important thing about your brand as a designer or as someone who's into digital marketing is brand trust. People need to trust that what you say you're going to deliver to them, that you can deliver. They need to trust that you care about their brand and you treat it like it's your brand. They need to know that the person that they're going to give this amount of money to, that they are going to get the job done. That is brand trust. And one of the important things about brand trust, and this is a secret of mine, is that I would decline to sell you a product if I think it is not right for you.
Mm-hmm.
There are some designers, hey, you want a flyer? All right, I'll go do it. I would tell you, hey, you can't do that just yet. I would recommend you don't do it. I remember that I had a client a couple of months ago and she wanted me to shoot a video for her and I asked her for a brand asset. She was like, what's that? I was like, well, I see that you have products that have labels and take it off brand assets. She was like, well, the printing company designed a label for me. I said, can you get me the PDF file of the label? She was like, they say they're not giving out that. I was like, wow. I said, so how are we going about this? You're going to just write anything? I need to brand your video. I need to have your social media icons on your video. I need to have your logo in your video. I don't have any of these things. Where's your logo? She was like, well, I don't have a logo. Just that print. I was like, Mom, I'm sorry. I can't do the video for you until you do a brand kit. And I explained to her more through the importance of that brand kit. I said, if you don't have it, I cannot do this. I will not do this. You're going to spend money and it is going to work for a little bit, but down the road, you'll have more problems. And she did a brand kit. And with that, she was able to do so much more. And would you believe that today she has not done the video? Instead, she's letting other people know, hey, this guy saved me from a bullet, and this guy did an excellent job at it. I am happy with how things are looking. And after he did my brand kit, the mock-ups was my Facebook cover photo and my profile images and everything. She said, my page looks well. People are seeing it. They treat it like a respected business because it's presented as such. She says, I'm actually making more sales since this happened. And she was completely happy with it. So through probing questions and through discovery calls to the customer, you understand what it is they really need versus what they think they might need at that point in time. And you help them along those lines so that they wouldn't encounter more problems in the future. And that has cemented a relationship of brand trust between me and that client. And they would call me even if they don't have business.
And clearly referring you as well.
Yes, I've had some referrals. I actually did a free logo for a guy. And he asked me if I could have done a sign for him. He wasn't working at that point in time and he wanted to start a barber shop and all he had was his cutters and thing. And I did it for him and he carried it by the printer. And the printer saw the design, asked them who was the designer, and they just gave him my number. And as a result, I have actually done SE papers for the past papers for the 2025 exam.
Wow.
And I've done a bit of other things. I've done designs for energy drinks and energy ampoules and that kind of thing. And he was just sending the work to me. He was just telling people, I know a great designer, I will send you to him. And when he's done, he will email the stuff to me and I'll print it. And that created a relationship between him and I. So now if anybody needs to get anything printed, I send everyone there.
Now that's the... Stuart, I know you're going to jump in, but folks, entrepreneurs out there, talk about networking. Stuart, networking.
Well, it's who you know. That's where the business coming from, right?
And who know you.
And who know you. And how do they know you too? They know you for good work.
Good work. Good stories. Good person. Well kept. They do good stuff.
You're not just looking for the money. He's saving your money.
Saving you.
I just really have one more question to wrap it up. So there's a whole program called Canva. You know, the do-it-yourselfers like myself.
You read my mind, boy.
So we were discussing how much of a threat is that to the industry. And
no way we could have this conversation and Canva didn't come up.
Exactly. So I said, I'm going to save this question for last, right? So the question is, what you were telling me is that you don't really see the Canva as being much of a threat because people will still want the professional touch. And from what I was saying is from my experiences, like if previously, say 7 out of 10 jobs I would have had to require a professional graphic artist, now it might be 2 or 3 out of the 10 jobs I might need a professional graphic artist. And remember, we had a long conversation on that. So I will just leave that in your hands there and listen to what you have to say now.
Well, I know that you were going to do this, and I know it was going to be the last question. I knew that because you know that I would say it again that I detest Canva as far as graphic design is concerned. But let us be adult about it, right? I have used Canva before. For design. I did not like it. I felt like I was barefoot and I was putting my foot in mud. But I'll tell you this. And I only feel that way because of what I have experienced and what I've gone through to achieve what I'm able to achieve through graphic design. And Canva is software that you can use to create graphic design, specifically if you're interested in a minimalist style of graphic design. If that is your thing, Canva is in fact the thing for you. If you want to go a bit more premium of a design with Canva, what you will have to do is outsource your premium elements, upload them, and then use them to that respect. And if you have the paid Canva, you would have more or less decent means to mask out or remove the background from certain images that you want to, so that you can have, that removed image as a centerpiece or as an element that could, bring a bit of depth and perception. But when it comes to other things, like, for example, logo design and creation, I do not think that the tools that Canva provides is efficient to take you to that peak when it comes to that level of designing, when there's a lot of depth involved, a lot of perception involved, a lot of things that come together that really puts you in the moment of the artwork. I do not think, in my opinion, that Canva is able to do that for me. However, I use Canva for documents. I use Canva for documents more than I use Microsoft Word. You simply install Grammarly on your Google as an extension, and I use it for documents. So now I have the autocorrect, but their document templates are fire. Invoices, receipts, performer invoices, project proposals, all of these things, Canva will streamline your documentation aspect of any agency and bring that to a minimal cost as far as time and resources are concerned. As a matter of fact, through Canva, you can open a business creating documents for clients. It is highly possible. So Canva is great, but when there are certain things you want to do that, it is just not going to fly with me. For example, motion design. I'm very passionate about motion design, and Canva does not provide 10% of what I need that Adobe After Effects would then provide for me. I am an Adobe user. I use the Adobe Suite, which means I use Adobe Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects, animation. I even use InDesign and Dimension. That's 6 items of software I use, and each one of these items and software does way more than Canva can do in its respective proficiency. But when it comes to documents, I wouldn't even use Adobe Acrobat for documents. I'll go to Canva. So in the end, as a designer, you use software that is proficient in whatever your need is at that point in time.
Which makes sense because there are so many tools.
What you need to do, because there are so many tools, it can confuse even you. You need to streamline your tools so that you have an understanding of it. Because trust me, you need a real brain. You need to have head like garlic to use so many items of software and remember everything. You cannot. It is humanly impossible. You might have to Google search how to do something that you did last week because you ran out of memory storage in your head to remember how to do this the next time. So again, streamline the software that you are going to utilize and why you are going to utilize it, and just switch to that point when you reach it.
I remember some of the pet peeves you had were that the words may not be centered, some of the graphic elements, the color choices. I'm talking about the do-it-yourselfers who employ in the Canva.
Yeah, it does peeve me, and it only peeves me because I know better, but I cannot judge someone who may not know better and would say, well, it's not no designer and it's not no designer. And honestly, I understand that. I only have true animosity towards the people who said, hey, I'm a graphic designer. I only use Canva. My God.
I would like to say something on that, but I won't.
I would like to say something about Adobe, but that's a whole different conversation because I know a lot of people are up in arms against Adobe. That whole subscription model. Before you buy the Adobe with all the different software for $1,200 US, but now the subscription every year you have to pay that, and after 5 years you already clear $7,000 for the same Adobe is paying for $1,200. So that whole service as a subscription, that's something we're going to have to discuss, Kendell, at a future episode.
Definitely.
And honestly, I detest it. I detest it so much.
I detest it as well.
Because after paying that subscription, that exorbitant subscription to get all of these things, and then when it comes on to the client, the artwork, they think it's too expensive. I think Adobe has done us dirty, really dirty with that. I do not appreciate it. But I also cannot deny that for me, it is the best graphic design software I have used, because I've used Adobe and I have used CorelDRAW and I've just become disenchanted with CorelDRAW.
They wanted to have access to all of your files.
I have a major issue with that. I do.
I don't want to go wrong into that, but Adobe, yeah, no people up in arms with Adobe right now.
Yeah, because it's infringing on your rights. It's infringing on your creative dynamics. And I can understand if they ask you and you give permission to get it done, but if it's being done without your permission, it's like saying every piece of artwork you create belongs to me.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what they're doing. What they're trying to do, I should say.
I have been in relationships like that, so I didn't know it well.
That's why you use the past tense. No, Jay, I mean, it's been a great conversation. We could definitely go on and on. I feel like, Stuart, is a trend now where we have to tell our guests we'll have to bring them back on.
Because the time is short.
Exactly. Definitely, we will have to continue this conversation because there's so many elements that we haven't even touched. But before we wrap up, we just want to express our gratitude to you, our appreciation as well for being here tonight, sharing all this great information in terms of graphic design, the whole industry.
I appreciate it. I really appreciate the time that I've spent with you guys. Again, I'm always up for good conversation. I believe that intelligent minds, they thrive when information is divulged. I appreciate the opportunity where I'm able to share things that would help our listeners to better understand the dynamic between the graphic designer and the clients, and also understanding, what goes into graphic design when you're a serious graphic designer, when this is your profession, when this is how you eat on a daily. I'm happy I was able to help to dispel certain myths while confirming others, it has been, a great evening. And again, I thank you all for it. And I thank everyone who's listening to the Big Potato podcast right now. And, I really hope that, things go really good with you guys in the near and distant future.
Thank you so much. And same to you, brother.
Thank you, Jay.
All the best to you.
Special edition, why Kendell?
Special edition.
Special edition.
All the graphic designers out there, and most importantly for all the brands out there, what should you do? I recommend having a chat with Jay about your brand kit and starting there. Thank you guys so much. And that's a wrap on the Big Potato Podcast for episode number 6.
Entrepreneurship, it's all game. The Big Potato Podcast is yours to claim. From startups to scaling up, we cover it all. So don't mess up. Monday nights, don't miss the show with Kendell and Stuart. Your time to grow, listen up. Take notes and learn. The Big Potato Podcast, next gen's turn.